Joining us today is the President and CEO of the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce, Steve Cuellar, and the University of South Florida economics professor, Dr. Thomas Becker. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Riddle me this. Yesterday, we did a show on the fact that home ownership in the Sarasota area is at its lowest point, or much lower than it used to be. But we're hearing that median incomes are up. So it would seem to the layperson that these things are in contradiction to each other. But are they really?
Well, I would just say one thing to keep in mind is that the nature of incomes here, as Steve and I were talking before the show, is really not one distribution, but two distributions. So you've got people who are, on one hand, very wealthy and doing well. Many of them are retired or working in professional or management level jobs. And then you've got our support employees, numerous people who are working in the hotels and in small businesses. So when you talk about incomes and the relationship between incomes and home ownership, I think you have to break it down into those two kind of subpopulations.
And Steve, the last time you and I talked, we talked about how corporate profits are up, but household wages were not climbing as fast. Has anything changed since then?
Well, there's a lag effect in the sense of a lot of companies, frankly, almost went through their reserves if they made it through the Great Recession, to the point of sort of eating their seed corn and the farmer's metaphor. And so they may be building back up their balance sheets now and getting a little elbow room and working existing employees pretty hard before they raise salaries too much or they hire too many new people. But there's a breaking point for that. You have to reward good people now that multiple places are hiring, so we do see the salaries coming up. To Tom's point about the home ownership, one sort of lag is that you have to build up credit, and particularly if you're a younger person, family, young professional, and you've got to get that a little bit of down payment together and your credit squared away, and that might take a couple of years after the Great Recession. So we should see more young people, I think, buying homes. The same thing with people who are middle-income folks who really suffered badly in the economic downturn, and many had to empty out their 401ks and incurred a great deal of debt. It's going to take them a good amount of time to recover and be able to go back in terms of home ownership. But the other question is that the stories that you often hear is that people have been able to go back to work after a recession, but their salaries are not what they were beforehand.
Yeah, I think that's true in a number of cases. If you were laid off, for example, oftentimes employers won't necessarily hire you back at your previous salary. You may not even get your previous job back. So that certainly worked to keep median incomes down for a long time, despite the fact that President Obama said the recession was over in 2010. As you pointed out, Alan, for many people it was much longer than that.
Okay. We're going to take just a quick break right now, and we're going to come back in a moment with our expert interview. The Sarasota County Economic Development Corporation focuses on growing the economy on the Suncoast by trying to attract companies and jobs to the area. ABC 7's Bobeth Yates sat down with the president and CEO, Mark Huey, to discuss why he thinks the median income is better in Sarasota compared to other large metropolitan areas in Florida. And that is tonight's expert interview.
When you look at some of the recent data that's come out about median household income, we're actually 4,000 or 5,000 higher in average median income than the Tampa Bay MSA.
But when you think of other areas, like for instance Miami and Tampa, and that we are doing better than them when it comes to the average household income, how do you explain that, or how do you describe that?
It is interesting when you look at data around Florida that Sarasota is even above the very large metros of Miami, and I think some of that is they have maybe larger tourism markets even than us. So some of the legacy industries which are part of our economy here are even bigger there. And sometimes those legacy industries like tourism pay a little bit lower wages. And we're glad to have them here. They're a big part of our economy. But I think that might be part of the answer. And it's a focus of our organization to really help jobs grow here, bring jobs here that help to raise that median household income.
What does that work entail? Like, how do you recruit these companies that can pay, higher wages?
Our first focus is to help local companies. We have a lot of great local companies here who are growing and are paying very high wages. Some of the companies we worked with this year, for example, the average wages for the jobs they're creating are over $75,000 a year. But then we also do look for companies who might be interested in coming here. And of course, we're very interested in helping those companies that are offering higher wages.
When we come back, our roundtable discussion continues. We are back with the President and CEO of the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce, Steve Cuellar, and the University of South Florida economics professor, Thomas Becker. Gentlemen, why are we doing a little bit better than, let's say, Tampa, Orlando, or Miami?
Well, I think there's two aspects to this. One is the fact that we're an extremely attractive place to live, and so there's a draw here that there might not be to Tampa. That's no insult to Tampa, but I just think that's a fact. And the other part of it is has to do with median income and how that's calculated. So to make it simple, household income equals earned income plus transfer income. And people who are retired have quite a bit of transfer income.
Right. So what you're saying here is when we're talking about median income, it's just a little bit deceiving because we're not talking about people who are working for a living and earning a salary. We're talking about people who are drawing down their retirement accounts, IRAs.
That's right.
Right. Well, this recent set of numbers that came out includes all types of incomes coming into a household. And with the high level of fairly well-situated retirees we have in Greater Sarasota, they're pulling their pension money in, or stocks and bonds, if you will. That's good for the community. They support the tax base, they help pay for our schools, they spend money in local businesses. But it's different than earned income. And actually, about half of household income in Sarasota County is earned by people working for wages. And in a typical county, or a county without so many retirees like Jacksonville and Duval County, 3/4 of household income is made by wages. So we've got a different set of revenue streams coming in, and we really have to look a little harder at what our people are making. And certainly the goal is to raise their earnings.
Well, I mean, you folks have the finger on the pulse of the business community. We talked earlier that at some point wages are going to have to go up faster than they are now. What are people waiting for? What are companies waiting for?
I think part of that is for the baby boomer tsunami of retirements to really start in earnest. And they were supposed to start retiring at $10,000 a day a couple of years ago, and some of them had to rebuild their retirement funds after the Great Recession. But we could get waves of retirement in the next 2-3 years. That'll be amazing. Every single remaining worker's value will be more, and their pay will increase, don't you think?
Notice that affects the supply and demand in the labor market. So I think Steve's exactly right that as we get a smaller supply because of the retirees, you can have a greater demand, and you have organizations less able to say, we're paying you in sunshine, and actually having to crank up the amount of wages.
You know, we talked about here that part of the reason why income is suppressed is because this is a tourism town. So is Orlando, so is Miami, that has similar issues. But is there any place in the state of Florida where it is not as reliant as tourism and has high-tech industries, and therefore median income is higher than it is here?
My oldest son works over in Melbourne on the other coast, and works for Harris, and he's an electrical engineer. And I think there's a lot of people and a lot of jobs on that coast that involve professionals and scientific type positions.
Yeah, we participate in a state association that is all about having young people and all people in Florida advance their education. And as your education goes up, 9 times out of 10, your income goes up. And the Space Coast part of Florida, just east of Orlando, it's full of master's degree engineers and PhDs and folks like that. But to the overall supply and demand, just our 2 counties, Manatee and Sarasota County, we're going to have about 33,000 open jobs over the next 5 years. 22,000 of them from people retiring, so replacement workers will be needed, and 11,000 from new jobs being created. That's a pretty big pipeline to fill, so I would suspect wages will go up.
Well, let me ask you, in addition to that,